Hi, this is AddleyTV, and I'm here to bring you my 7.1 Ray of Frost rating guide. Now there's a lot to go over in this video, so let's jump right in. The idea here is to have your Icy Veins buff active for every single Ray of Frost. If we can do this, we can hit high single target damage because Ray of Frost scales very well with haste. Some advantages to this build are that it has high single target damage, and you can pump out lots of damage during high burst windows, like when you have to hit Ursoc during his execute phase, the Heart of Corruption when you're hitting the heart inside the tree, or Xavius when you have the corruption buff. Now there are some disadvantages to this build, and that would be its low mobility because you have to stand still while channeling Ray of Frost, its low multi-target damage, it has a very unforgiving rotation, and not only that, but it's gear dependent because you need high levels of haste to be able to extend your Icy Veins to your second Ray of Frost. Now for our talents, we take Ray of Frost, of course, Shimmer, Rune of Power, Frozen Touch, Ice Flows, Unstable Magic, and Thermal Void. So we take Shimmer in the second tier because it lets you reposition without interrupting your rotation. We then take Rune of Power because it has high synergy with Ray of Frost, Frozen Touch because it extends your Icy Veins duration, Ice Flows again for its mobility, and then we take Unstable Magic. Now the reason we take Unstable Magic here over Frostbomb is because it helps us extend our Icy Veins to our second Ray of Frost. Even with high levels of haste, it is extremely difficult to achieve this, and by not having to cast Frostbomb, we give ourselves more chances to proc a Fingers of Frost or Brain Freeze. Not only that, but at higher gear scores, Unstable Magic's value starts to outweigh Frostbomb's value altogether for single target. Now lastly, we take Thermal Void for our level 100 talent because this lets us extend our Icy Veins duration. Okay, so now we're going to look at our artifact traits and our relics. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go up and get our Let It Go trait. It gives Ice Lance damage, and Ice Lance is our second highest damage source. From here we're going to want to switch directions to get our Chain Reaction trait, as it is another large damage boost for Ice Lance. From there we're going to go up to our Gold trait, because it not only increases our water elemental damage, but it also gives us another chance to proc a Fingers of Frost proc. After that we're going to want to beeline it to our Chill to the Core Gold trait, as it gives 20% frost damage during our opener, which is extremely valuable for our Ray of Frost. To get there we go through the top side of the weapon. We do this because the Clarity of Thought artifact trait gives us a bonus % chance to proc a Brain Freeze, and that extra Brain Freeze helps us extend our Icy Veins when we use our Frostbolt, Flurry, Ice Lance combo. After we get Chilled to the Core, we go back and we get our Icy Hand trait that we passed, which increases our maximum charges of Fingers of Frost by 1. After that, we go and get our last Gold trait. So from here we'll get Ice 9, which gives our Frostbolt a chance to generate 2 icicles. From there we'll get our Frostbolt damage, and then we'll finish things off with getting our Frozen Orb damage. That opens up our Spellborn trait, and then from there we just put as many points in it as we can. When we look at what relics you're going to want for this build, there's a clear winner, and that's any relic that increases the amount of artifact trait points in Frozen Veins. So what Frozen Veins does is it lowers the remaining cooldown of your Icy Veins every time you crit with your Frostbolt. And it's so important with this build because with 3 relics, even with the high amounts of haste that we stack, we're able to lower the cooldown of our Icy Veins so that it lines up with our third Ray of Frost. So if you can't get a Frozen Veins relic, you could also go for your Clarity of Thought relic, which increases your Brain Freeze proc chance, or Let It Go, which increases your Ice Lance damage, and these are your next best 2 relics. Now let's take a look at your stat priorities. As a general rule, you're going to want to fill in your haste, then your crit, and then your int, versatility, and lastly by a good margin, your mastery. Now Ray of Frost scales very well with haste, and there's a few breakpoints that you're going to want to look out for. So the tables below show the different values of haste you need to get an extra tick of Ray of Frost during the different combinations of haste buffs. Now you only have to worry about the last column if you have the legendary ring or if you're a troll, but what you want to do is get as close to one of these values as you can without going under. And we can use our ring enchants and our gems to help work around these values, which we'll talk about later in the video. I also want to talk about the haste breakpoint of 13,796, as it gives you an extra tick of Ray of Frost while you have your Icy Veins active, or while you have your Icy Veins and Bloodlust, effectively giving you 2 ticks for the same breakpoint. Now I know it's hard to get this much haste in the current patch we're in, but it's still worth mentioning. For gear, you're going to want haste main stat, crit off stat pieces, and the best way to farm for these is in Mythic Plus, as you can farm a specific dungeon for the gear slot you need. Not only that, but it gives you artifact power and a chance at a legendary drop. For your legendaries, you're going to want your legendary gloves. Now they don't come with your best stats, but the extra Fingers of Frost procs that it gives you is invaluable for extending your Icy Veins long enough for your second Ray of Frost. As we mentioned earlier in the video, it's very hard to accomplish this, and these gloves just make it much easier. Now for your second legendary, depending on the length of the fight, you're either going to want your Ice Lance Bracers or your Heroism Ring. And if the fight lasts longer than 5 minutes and you can get good value out of your second Heroism, I would go for the ring. Otherwise, you can just use your legendary Ice Lance Bracers. Now the last thing we need to talk about for gear is Trinkets, and there's a few Trinkets that stand above the rest that we need to talk about. First, we have the PvP on-proc Intellect Trinket, and then Arcano Crystal off of Withered Gem, the Devil's Sword Shock Baton off of the World Quest in Suramar, and then the Swarming Plague Hive off of Nathandra. Out of these 4 trinkets, I would say that the PvP on-proc Intellect Trinket is the best, as it could also roll haste along with its versatility, then the Arcano Crystal, then the Devil's Sword, and then lastly the Plague Hive. However, they are all very good. The next thing we're going to look at is our Enchants. Now in Legion there are 3 performance enhancing enchants, and that's for your neck, your rings, and your cloak. For your neck, you're going to want Mark of the Hidden Satyr for your chance to proc raw damage. For your rings, you're going to want Binding of Haste or Binding of Crit, depending on your breakpoints mentioned earlier in this video. And for your cloak, you're going to want Binding of Int for 200 raw int. For gems, we have the Quick Dawnlight for 150 haste, or the Deadly Eye Prophecy for 150 crit, which one you use again depends on the breakpoints mentioned earlier in this video. What you want to do is hit the highest haste breakpoint that you can. Any extra stats that you might have should be put into your critical strike rating. We can use our gems and our ring enchants to help us do this. Alright, so now we get to the fun part of the video, and that is the opener and the rotation. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a clip of me going through my opener without any interruptions, and then we'll go back to analyze it because a lot of things happen very quickly, and I want to show you what it looks like in real time. Alright, so let's go back and look at what I did. Now the idea here is that we want to use all our Fingers of Frost proc generators first, so that the cooldowns are ticking down before we channel our Ray of Frost. This gives us as many Fingers of Frost procs as we can to extend our Icy Veins to our second Ray. So the first thing we do is we cast our Frostbolt twice while channeling our Water Jet. This gives us our first 2 Fingers of Frost procs. After that, we cast a Blizzard and then a Rune of Power. We do this because Blizzard has a high base damage which synergizes well with our Rune, and it also gives us a chance to proc extra Fingers of Frost procs before we Icy Veins. Okay, so what we do next is a little tricky. After we Rune of Power, we shoot out a Frozen Orb, and then we wait a global before we Icy Veins. The reason we do this is because we have to Rune of Power again before we Ray of Frost, and if we were to Icy Veins right away, there would be 1 second at the end of our Ray where we do not have the Chill to the Core buff. So by waiting that global, we make sure we have the Chill to the Core buff for the entirety of our Ray of Frost, which is our highest damage dealer. Okay, so after we Icy Veins, we're going to want to dump our Fingers of Frost procs, and to make things easier, I've just macroed Ice Lance into my Icy Veins. After that, we're going to Ebb and Bolt, dump our charges again, and then Frozen Touch. That way, all our Fingers of Frost proc generators are on cooldown before we Ray of Frost. After that, if we were really unlucky with our procs, we might have to fill time by casting a Frostbolt before we can Rune of Power. Otherwise, we should just Rune of Power right away and cast a Ray of Frost. If we have any extra Fingers of Frost procs, we should hold on to them because we do not want to delay our Ray of Frost any longer. Alright, so at this point in the rotation, we're going to dump any Fingers of Frost procs that we might have saved, and then use our Water Jet because it just came off cooldown. And now we can just settle into our regular bone-chilling Thermal Void rotation, where we're just trying to use as many Fingers of Frost proc generators as we can, while trying to keep a high stack of Chain Reaction. Alright, so at this point in the rotation, we're kind of hoping that we've casted enough Ice Lances that our Icy Veins buff will be active for the entirety of our second Ray of Frost channel. Now I have the Legendary Belt, so I'm going to use a Blizzard before I Rune of Power, but if you don't have it, you can just go straight into your Ray of Frost. However, if you think you have time to cast a Blizzard beforehand and still have enough time on your Icy Veins for the entirety of your Ray of Frost, you can go ahead and cast a Blizzard as well. Alright, so at this point in the rotation, unless you have the Legendary Gloves, you've probably lost your Icy Veins buff, and you can just settle back into your regular Frost Mage rotation. Now I wouldn't use any more Rune of Powers, because if you hold the rest, they'll line up again with your next Icy Veins, which will line up again with your next Ray of Frost, and we can just open up the exact same way, except this time without any heroism. Alright, well there you guys go. That is my Ray of Frost Frost Mage guide for Legion. I know I've been getting a lot of questions about my Mage lately and how I play, and this is exactly how I do it. So if I didn't answer anything in this video, or if you have more questions, please feel free to ask them in the comments below. I'll also leave a link for my Twitch in the description, so you can always try to find me there for up-to-date information. Without any further ado, I want to say thanks for watching, and stay safe everyone.